If someone had told me that a random video on the internet would destroy my marriage, I would have laughed. Not because my marriage was perfect, but because I trusted my wife. At least, I thought I did. My name is Daniel, and for 7 years I had been married to Sophia. Sophia was originally from Europe. We met while she was studying abroad in the United States. She was intelligent, ambitious, and had a personality that could light up an entire room. People loved being around her. I did too. After dating for 3 years, we got married. The first few years were good. Not perfect. No marriage is. We argued about money sometimes. We disagreed about future plans. But nothing serious. At least that's what I believed. About 2 years before everything fell apart, Sophia started traveling more for work. She worked for an international marketing company and often attended conferences in different cities. Sometimes she was gone for a few days. Sometimes for an entire week. I never questioned it. Her company was growing. Her career was taking off. I was proud of her. Whenever she returned home, she brought stories about new clients, hotels, airports, and interesting people she met along the way. One thing I noticed, however, was that she slowly became more protective of her phone. At first it seemed insignificant. Then it became impossible to ignore. She started turning the screen away whenever messages arrived. She changed passwords. She carried the phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. When I asked about it, she laughed. "You watch too many movies." Maybe she was right. I wanted to believe her, so I did. Life continued. Months passed. Then one Saturday afternoon, something strange happened. I was watching videos online while cleaning the apartment. The algorithm recommended a channel that posted security camera footage from around the world. Car accidents, funny moments, unexpected events, mindless entertainment. I clicked on a video titled, "Passenger Causes Chaos During Taxi Ride in Prague." The video was only a few minutes long. I almost skipped it, but for some reason, I let it play. The footage showed the inside of a taxi. The camera faced both the driver and the passengers. A young couple entered the vehicle. The image quality wasn't great. I wasn't paying much attention. Then I froze. The woman in the back seat looked familiar. Very familiar. I paused the video. My heart started beating faster. No, it couldn't be. I rewound several seconds. Played it again. Paused. Zoomed in. The woman had the same hair, the same smile, the same small birthmark near her left cheek. My stomach dropped. It was Sophia. I stared at the screen, trying to convince myself I was wrong, trying to find any explanation. Maybe someone who looked like her. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe the low video quality was fooling me. But deep down, I already knew. It was her. The timestamp on the video showed it had been recorded 8 months earlier, during one of her business trips. The man sitting beside her wasn't me. That much was obvious. He looked younger, maybe 30. Dark hair, leather jacket, someone I had never seen before. For several minutes I sat motionless. The rational part of my brain kept searching for answers. Maybe it was a colleague, maybe a client, maybe a friend. Then the video continued. The couple laughed together. The driver joked with them. The woman leaned her head onto the man's shoulder. I felt cold. Very cold. Still, none of that proved anything. It looked inappropriate, but not definitive. Then something happened that changed everything. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror and smiled. The man handed him money. A lot more than a normal fare. The driver laughed and pulled the vehicle into a quiet side street. The video ended there. No explanation, no context, just an abrupt ending. Most viewers probably found it confusing. I didn't, because I recognized the look on Sophia's face. I had seen it before, years ago, back when she used to look at me that way. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to find the original source. Eventually, I discovered that the footage had been copied from a local social media page in Prague. The comments underneath were mostly written in Czech. I used an online translator. What I read made my blood run cold. Several comments referred to the couple as regular customers. Others mentioned that the taxi driver was known for posting unusual recordings online. One comment stood out. It had thousands of likes. It roughly translated to, "That's the married woman who always traveled here for work." I read it 3 times, then a 4th, then a 5th. My hands were shaking because suddenly this wasn't just a strange video. It was something much worse. Someone else had recognized her, which meant this wasn't hidden, at least not completely. I looked at the upload date again. 8 months. The video had been online for 8 months. How had I never seen it before? How many other people had? How many coworkers? Friends? Strangers? I felt sick. That evening, Sophia returned home from shopping. She walked through the door smiling, holding grocery bags, acting completely normal. "Hey," she said. "Hey." She stopped immediately. "What happened?" I tried to remain calm. Nothing on my face, nothing in my voice. Years later, I still don't know how I managed it. Long day. She nodded, then kissed my cheek. A simple gesture. Something she had done thousands of times before. But this time, it felt different. Because all I could think about was that video, that taxi, that man, and the terrifying possibility that my wife had been living a completely different life while I believed everything was fine. That night, I barely slept. And around 3 in the morning, while Sophia slept peacefully beside me, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. First, I needed the truth. And I had a feeling that the video I'd found was only the beginning. The next morning, I called in sick. Not because I was physically ill, because I couldn't focus on anything else. For hours, I sat in front of my computer replaying the video. Every movement, every expression, every detail. I was looking for something I had missed, some clue that would prove I was wrong. I never found one. Instead, I noticed new things. The way Sophia smiled at the man beside her. The way he casually placed his hand on her knee. The comfort between them. People don't behave that way after meeting for the first time. They behave that way when they know each other very well. Around noon, I started researching the original source. The reposted version I'd found wasn't useful, but eventually I tracked down the account that had uploaded the footage first. It belonged to a small local taxi service in Prague. Most of the content was harmless. Funny passengers, tourists getting lost, people singing while drunk. Nothing unusual. Then I found the original clip. The comments section was much larger. Hundreds of replies, thousands of views. Many comments were in Czech. I translated them one by one. Most were jokes, but a few caught my attention. One user wrote, "The blonde woman appears here every few months." Another replied, "She always rides with different men." I stopped reading. My chest felt tight. Different men. Not one man. Different men. I immediately tried convincing myself the comments were nonsense. Internet comments aren't evidence. People invent stories all the time, but once an idea enters your mind, it's difficult to remove it. The rest of the day, I couldn't think about anything else. That evening, Sophia returned from work. She kissed me, asked about my day, complained about a difficult client. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Too normal. I watched her while she spoke, wondering how many lies were hidden inside every sentence, wondering whether she had any idea that I knew something. If she did, she never showed it. 3 days later, I made a decision that changed everything. I contacted the taxi company. At first, I wasn't sure what I would say. Eventually, I sent a simple email. I explained that I had seen one of their videos and wanted to ask a few questions. I expected to be ignored. Instead, someone replied the next day. The message was short. Very short. The company owner thanked me for contacting them, but explained that they couldn't discuss customers due to privacy concerns. That should have been the end of it. But attached to the email was something unexpected. A name. The driver who recorded the video. Martin. I stared at the screen for several minutes. Then I searched social media. To my surprise, Martin wasn't difficult to find. He posted publicly photos, videos, travel stories, taxi stories, hundreds of posts. I spent hours scrolling. Then I found something that made my heart stop. A photo, 8 months old, taken outside a restaurant in Prague. Several people stood together, smiling at the camera. One of them was Martin. Another was Sophia. I nearly dropped my phone. The caption translated roughly to, "Great evening with friends." Friends. Sure. I zoomed in. The same man from the taxi video was standing beside her. His arm rested around her waist. Not casually. Intimately. Comfortably. The kind of touch people don't use unless they are involved. At that moment, any remaining doubt disappeared. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't an innocent friendship. My wife had lied. The only question remaining was how much. Over the next week, I continued digging. What I discovered shocked me. Sophia's business trips weren't nearly as frequent as she'd claimed. Her company website listed major conferences attended by employees. Several trips she supposedly took never appeared anywhere. No events, no conferences, nothing. In some cases, she had told me she would be gone for 5 days. Yet company records showed only 2 days of official meetings. 3 extra days, unaccounted for. 3 days I knew nothing about. 3 days she had explained away with ease. The deeper I looked, the worse things became. Then came the moment that truly terrified me. One Friday evening, I was reviewing old bank statements, something I should have done years earlier. I noticed repeated charges from hotels in different European cities. Hotels she never mentioned. Hotels that had nothing to do with her company's travel bookings. At first, there were only a few, then dozens, then more. My hands were shaking again because patterns were starting to emerge. Cities, dates, trips, everything connected. And every connection pointed in the same direction. A secret life. Not one mistake. Not one affair. A secret life. I sat alone in my office until nearly midnight, trying to understand how someone could hide so much. Then something unexpected happened. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. "Hello?" A man's voice answered. "Daniel?" "Yes." "My name is Martin, the taxi driver." Every muscle in my body tensed. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I will never forget. "I think we need to talk about your wife." My heart nearly stopped, because the tone of his voice wasn't hostile. It wasn't mocking. It sounded worried, genuinely worried. And in that moment, I realized the truth might be far bigger than I had imagined. Much bigger. Because Martin wasn't calling to protect Sophia. He was calling to warn me. And what he revealed next would completely change the way I saw my marriage. I sat frozen in my chair. The taxi driver had somehow found my phone number. That alone was unsettling. But it wasn't what frightened me most. It was his voice. Martin didn't sound angry. He didn't sound amused. He sounded concerned. Deeply concerned. "How did you get my number?" I finally asked. There was a brief silence. "A friend helped me find it." That wasn't reassuring. "I know this sounds strange," he continued, "but I think you deserve to know the truth." The truth. Over the previous 2 weeks, that word had become both my greatest obsession and my greatest fear. "What truth?" Martin exhaled heavily. "The woman in the video. My wife." "Yes." Another pause. Then he said it. The man with her wasn't her boyfriend. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. "What?" "He wasn't her boyfriend." I felt my stomach tighten. "Then who was he?" Martin hesitated. "A customer." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" His next sentence changed everything. "I've seen your wife with several different men." The room suddenly felt much smaller. I stood up and began pacing. "No, I'm sorry. No, I wish I was wrong." I stopped walking. For the first time since finding the video, I genuinely wanted someone to be lying. Anyone. But Martin sounded sincere. Painfully sincere. "How many?" I asked quietly. Another pause. "I don't know exactly." My heart sank. "But more than one." I closed my eyes, trying to stay calm, trying to think logically. Maybe he was mistaken. Maybe he confused her with someone else. Maybe. Then Martin interrupted my thoughts. I have photographs. The words hit like a punch. Photographs. Plural. Not a photograph. Photographs. I sat back down. Send them. A few moments later, my phone vibrated. One image arrived. Then another. Then another. 5 in total. My hands trembled as I opened them. The first showed Sophia entering a restaurant with the man from the taxi video. The second showed her leaving a hotel with someone else. Someone. Completely different. The third showed her sitting at an outdoor cafe. Another man. Another city. Another date. I couldn't breathe. Every image contained the same woman, my wife, and every image contained a different man. I stared at the screen, unable to process what I was seeing. This isn't possible. Martin sounded exhausted. I thought the same thing. What do you mean? He sighed. You're not the first husband I've spoken to. For several seconds, I forgot how to speak. What? I said you're not the first. The room spun. Not the first husband. Not the first conversation. Not the first discovery. I felt sick. Explain. Martin lowered his voice. The taxi company started receiving complaints. What kind of complaints? People recognizing passengers. I remembered the comments. The videos. The social media posts. Everything. Martin continued. Most videos were harmless. Then another pause. But your wife appeared multiple times. Multiple times. The words echoed inside my head. Multiple times. Not once. Not twice. Multiple. The situation was becoming impossible to comprehend. For years, I had believed I knew exactly who Sophia was. Now it felt like I had married a stranger. Martin eventually revealed something even worse. Several months earlier, another man had contacted him after recognizing Sophia in a different video. The man wasn't her husband. He believed he was her boyfriend, a long-distance boyfriend, someone she supposedly met during one of her business trips. According to Martin, that man had been devastated because he also believed the relationship was exclusive. I laughed, a short, broken laugh, the kind that comes from disbelief. My wife had apparently managed to build entirely separate relationships in different countries, and none of the men knew about each other, at least not initially. I spent nearly 2 hours talking with Martin. By the end of the conversation, one fact had become painfully clear. The affair I'd imagined wasn't an affair. It was a pattern, a lifestyle, a system, something that had likely existed for years. When the call finally ended, I sat alone in silence, looking at the photographs, one after another. Every image felt like another piece of my marriage disappearing. Then I noticed something strange. In one photograph, Sophia was carrying a small red handbag. I recognized it immediately. She had told me she lost that bag during a work trip. Lost it. I remembered comforting her, helping her search for replacements online. Listening to her complain about the inconvenience. The bag hadn't been lost. She had simply lied. And if she could lie about something so small, so effortlessly, what else had she lied about? That question haunted me for days. Then, late one evening, while reviewing the photos again, I noticed something else. A reflection. Tiny, barely visible. In a restaurant window. I zoomed in. The image became blurry, but I could still make out enough details. Someone was taking the photograph. Not Martin. Someone else. Someone following Sophia. Someone who seemed to know exactly where she would be. A chill ran through my body, because suddenly a new possibility appeared. What if Martin wasn't the only person investigating her? What if someone else had already discovered the truth? And if they had, who were they? The answer arrived 3 days later, in the form of an email from a man living in Germany. A man who claimed he had been dating Sophia for nearly 8 months. A man who had absolutely no idea she was married. And attached to his message was evidence that would completely destroy the last remaining pieces of the life I thought I had. I almost deleted the email. Not because it looked fake, because I wasn't sure I could handle any more bad news. The sender's name was Thomas. He lived in Germany. The subject line contained only 6 words. I think we know the same woman. My stomach tightened. For several minutes, I stared at the message without opening it. Eventually, curiosity won. I clicked. The email was surprisingly polite. Thomas explained that he had found my contact information through a chain of conversations involving Martin, the taxi driver. At first, I assumed it was some kind of misunderstanding. Then, I started reading, and everything changed. Thomas claimed he had met Sophia nearly a year earlier, at a conference in Berlin. According to him, she introduced herself as a divorced marketing consultant. Divorced. The word immediately caught my attention. Not married, not separated, divorced. She had completely erased me from the story. The email continued. After meeting in Berlin, they stayed in contact. Text messages, phone calls, video chats, weekend visits. The relationship grew serious. Very serious. Then came the sentence that nearly made me drop my phone. I thought we were planning a future together. Future. While she was married to me. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what I was reading. Thomas wasn't describing a short affair. He wasn't describing a fling. He was describing an entire relationship, a complete parallel life. Attached to the email were screenshots, hundreds of messages, photos, travel reservations, hotel bookings, voice recordings. The evidence was overwhelming. And what disturbed me most wasn't the betrayal, it was the consistency. Sophia wasn't improvising. She had created an entirely different identity, a different personal history, different stories, different plans, different promises. Every lie carefully constructed, every detail managed, every contradiction hidden. For the first time, I began wondering how long she had been doing this. Years? Maybe. Longer? Possibly. I responded to Thomas the same day. A few hours later, we scheduled a video call. The moment his camera turned on, I saw the same exhaustion I'd been carrying for weeks. He looked like a man who hadn't slept properly in months. We spent nearly 3 hours comparing information. Dates, trips, photos, messages. The more we compared, the worse things became. Many of the dates overlapped perfectly. When Sophia told me she was attending conferences, she was often meeting Thomas. When Thomas believed she was returning home after visiting him, she was returning to me. Neither of us had known the other existed. Until now. Then Thomas said something unexpected. I don't think we're the only ones. I frowned. What do you mean? He opened another folder on his computer. My heart immediately sank. More screenshots. More conversations. More names. At least 2 additional men. One from Austria, another from Belgium. Both appeared to have been involved with Sophia at different times, possibly at the same time. Nobody knew the full timeline. But one thing was becoming clear. This wasn't a single mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a pattern, a long-term pattern. Over the next several weeks, an unlikely group formed. Me, Thomas, Martin, and eventually 2 other men. 5 strangers, connected by one person, Sophia. Under normal circumstances, none of us would have ever met. Now we spent hours exchanging information, trying to understand what had happened, trying to understand her, trying to understand how one person could maintain so many separate lives. The answer never came. Every new discovery only created more questions. Then came the breakthrough. The thing that finally revealed the true scale of everything. It happened by accident. One of the men discovered an old social media account Sophia had apparently forgotten to delete. Most of the content was years old. Vacation photos, restaurant pictures, travel updates. Nothing unusual. Then someone noticed something strange. The photographs weren't random. They formed a timeline of cities, countries, trips, relationships. Each period seemed connected to a different person, almost like chapters in a book. And once we started mapping them together, The pattern became impossible to ignore. For years, Sophia had been moving between different lives, different identities, different versions of herself, depending on who she was talking to. The realization was terrifying because none of us had actually known her. Not completely. We had each known a version of her. A carefully edited version. A character. Not the real person. And the worst part? She was incredibly good at it. Good enough to fool intelligent people, successful people, careful people. For years. One evening, while reviewing everything we'd collected, Thomas suddenly became quiet. Very quiet. "What's wrong?" I asked. He stared at his screen, then slowly turned his laptop toward the camera. I felt my blood run cold. It was a photograph. A recent photograph. Only 2 weeks old. Sophia, standing beside a man none of us recognized, smiling, holding his hand, looking completely happy. A brand new man. A brand new story. A brand new victim. While her marriage was collapsing, while multiple relationships were being exposed, while lies were unraveling everywhere, she had already started again. At that moment, I finally understood something. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about romance. It wasn't even about affairs. Sophia wasn't chasing relationships. She was chasing the excitement of creating them, the attention, the secrecy, the fantasy. And that realization changed everything. Because, for the first time, I stopped asking why. The answer didn't matter anymore. What mattered was moving on. But before I could do that, there was still one final confrontation waiting. One final conversation. And when Sophia finally realized that all of us had found each other and compared stories, her reaction was nothing like I expected. I expected Sophia to deny everything. That seemed like the obvious outcome. After all, she had spent years building lives, years creating stories, years convincing different people that they each knew the real her. But I was wrong. The confrontation happened much sooner than anyone expected. And it started with a single message. Thomas was the first to receive it. Late one evening, his phone rang. The caller was Sophia. He didn't answer. A few minutes later, she sent a text. "We need to talk." Then another. "I know you've been speaking with people." Then another. "Call me." The messages continued throughout the night. By morning, all of us had received something similar. Me, Thomas, Martin, the others. She knew. Somehow, she knew. The walls were finally collapsing around her, and she was panicking. For years, Sophia had controlled every conversation, every relationship, every version of the truth. Now she had lost that control, and it terrified her. We created a group call that evening, not because we wanted revenge, not because we wanted drama. We simply wanted answers, real answers. For once, to our surprise, Sophia agreed. The video call began at 8 o'clock. 5 men, 5 different cities, 5 different stories, 1 woman. When Sophia appeared on screen, she looked nothing like the confident person I remembered. She looked exhausted, nervous, afraid. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The silence was uncomfortable. Then Thomas finally broke it. "How many?" Sophia stared at the screen. "What? How many people?" No answer. The silence itself felt like an answer. Martin spoke next. "Were any of us telling the truth when we described our relationship?" Again, silence. Then Sophia sighed. A long, defeated sigh. The kind people make when they realize the game is over. "I never wanted this." I almost laughed. None of us had wanted this. Yet here we were. For nearly an hour, questions came from every direction. Some were angry. Some were calm. Some were heartbreaking. One man asked if she had ever loved him. Another asked whether anything she said had been real. Thomas asked whether she had actually planned a future with him. I asked the simplest question of all. "Who are you?" For the first time, Sophia looked directly at me. And for a moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Not arrogance. Not manipulation. Just sadness. Genuine sadness. Then she finally started talking. Not defending herself. Not arguing. Just talking. According to her, everything began years earlier. One lie became another. One secret became two. Then three. Then 10. Each relationship created new stories, new promises, new expectations. Eventually, the lies became too large to manage. Yet she kept going, because stopping would require admitting the truth. And the truth terrified her. The strange thing was that her explanation didn't make me feel better. It didn't make me feel worse either. It simply confirmed what I'd already learned. There wasn't some hidden reason that would suddenly make everything understandable. No dramatic revelation, no shocking secret, just years of bad decisions, repeated over and over again. At one point, Thomas asked the question everyone had been thinking. Did you ever love any of us? The call became completely silent. Even Sophia seemed unsure how to answer. Finally, she said, yes. Nobody responded, because the answer created more questions than it solved. If she loved us, why lie? If she cared, why continue? If she understood the damage, why keep going? None of it made sense. Then came the moment that changed everything. The newest man appeared, the man from the recent photograph. Until that point, he had known almost nothing, only fragments, pieces. His name was Lucas, and unlike the rest of us, he was still in the early stages of discovering the truth. The moment he joined the call and saw everyone together, confusion spread across his face. Then realization followed, slowly, painfully, the same realization all of us had experienced before. The realization that the person he trusted wasn't who she claimed to be. Nobody needed to explain much. The evidence spoke for itself. Within minutes, Lucas understood, and when he did, he quietly left the call. No shouting, no accusations, just silence. The saddest reaction of all. Because by that point, there was nothing left to say. After Lucas disconnected, Sophia started crying. For the first time since this entire nightmare began, real tears. Not dramatic tears, not manipulative tears, just exhaustion. Years of lies finally catching up to her. Years of consequences arriving all at once. And suddenly, something unexpected happened. My anger disappeared. Not completely, but enough. Because sitting there, looking at her, I no longer saw some mastermind controlling everyone's lives. I saw someone who had spent years destroying her own future, one decision at a time. Someone who thought she could keep running forever. Someone who had finally run out of road. Near the end of the call, Sophia looked directly at me. Daniel, I already knew what was coming. I'm sorry. For a moment, nobody spoke. Not because the apology fixed anything. Because it didn't. Some damage cannot be repaired. Some trust never returns. Some chapters cannot be rewritten. But it was the first honest thing I'd heard from her in a very long time. When the call ended, I sat alone in my apartment. The room was completely quiet. And for the first time since finding that taxi video, I felt something unexpected. Not happiness. Not victory. Peace. Because the truth was finally complete. No more questions. No more investigations. No more hidden lives. Just reality. And reality, however painful, was easier to live with than lies. What I didn't know then was that 3 years later, I would accidentally meet Sophia again. And that final encounter would reveal whether people like her can truly change, or whether some stories are destined to repeat themselves forever. 3 years passed. 3 quiet years. 3 years without investigations, without screenshots, without secret phone calls, without wondering whether every story I heard was true. The divorce had been finalized long ago. The apartment was gone. The old routines were gone. The life I once imagined for myself was gone. And honestly, that turned out to be a good thing, because little by little, I built something better. The first year after everything collapsed was difficult. I won't pretend otherwise. There were days when I questioned every decision I had ever made. Days when I replayed conversations from the past. Days when I wondered whether I had missed obvious warning signs. But eventually those thoughts became less frequent, then less important, then almost irrelevant. Life moved forward, as it always does. I changed jobs, moved to a different city, started traveling more, met new people, made new friends. Eventually, I even started dating again. Slowly, carefully. Not because I was afraid of relationships, because I had finally learned the value of peace. And I wasn't willing to lose it again. The strange thing about healing is that it happens when you're not paying attention. One day you realize you haven't thought about the past in weeks, then months, then even longer. Eventually, Sophia became a story I told occasionally. Not a wound, just a story. Then, one rainy afternoon, everything changed. Or at least I thought it would. I was waiting for a train in Vienna during a business trip. The station was crowded. People everywhere. Announcements echoing through the building. I was checking emails when I heard a familiar voice. A voice I hadn't heard in years. "Daniel," my heart stopped. I turned around. And there she was. Sophia. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. It felt surreal, like seeing a character from a previous life. Someone who belonged to another chapter. Not this one. Not anymore. She looked older. Not dramatically. Just older. More tired. More serious. Less confident. The version of Sophia standing in front of me looked very different from the woman who once believed she could control everything. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi." The conversation began awkwardly, as most conversations between former spouses probably do. We talked about work, travel, the weather, anything except the obvious. Eventually, she laughed. We're both avoiding the topic. I smiled. Probably, for the first time, the tension disappeared. Not completely, but enough. Enough to have a normal conversation. Enough to act like two people instead of two enemies. Then Sophia asked a question. "Are you happy?" The same question she had asked years earlier in my imagination. The question everyone eventually asks. I thought about it carefully, then nodded. Yes, and for perhaps the 100th time in recent years, I realized how true that answer was. I really was happy. Not because everything had gone perfectly, because it hadn't. Not because life was easy, because it wasn't. I was happy because my life was honest, simple, real. Sophia smiled, a genuine smile. That's good. Then she looked away. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought. Finally, she said, "I wasn't." That surprised me. Not because I expected her to be happy, because of how honestly she said it. No excuses, no performance, just honesty. For the next 20 minutes, we talked more openly than we had during the final years of our marriage. She told me she had changed cities several times, changed jobs, started over, repeatedly. Every time she thought she could leave the past behind. Every time, the same problems followed her. Not because people were chasing her, because she kept making the same mistakes. Then she said something I never expected. The worst part wasn't losing relationships. I waited. It was realizing I didn't know who I was without the lies. For several seconds, I said nothing. Because that sentence explained more than any of her previous excuses ever had. She wasn't talking about cheating, or affairs, or secrets. She was talking about identity. For years, she had adapted herself to whoever stood in front of her. Different stories, different personalities, different versions. Eventually, she had become trapped inside those versions. And when they disappeared, she was left alone with herself. A train announcement interrupted us. Mine. The train was arriving. I picked up my bag. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Sophia smiled. A small smile. A tired smile. But a real one. "I'm sorry, Daniel." There it was. No audience. No witnesses. No dramatic confrontation. Just two people standing in a train station. and one honest apology. This time, it felt different. Not because it erased the past. Nothing could do that. Not because it fixed anything. It didn't. But because I believed she meant it. For the first time, I nodded. Take care of yourself. You too. Then I walked toward the train. As I found my seat, I looked out the window. The station slowly began moving away. People became smaller, then disappeared, including Sophia. And in that moment, I realized something important. Finding that video years earlier had felt like the worst thing that could ever happen to me. The end of my marriage. The end of my future. The end of everything. But it wasn't. It was the beginning. The beginning of a life built on truth. The beginning of real peace. The beginning of understanding that sometimes losing the wrong person is actually the best thing that can happen to you. I never saw Sophia again. At least not in person. And that's okay. Some people are meant to stay in your past. Not because you hate them. Not because you fear them. Because their role in your story is finished. The taxi video that once destroyed my world eventually became nothing more than a memory. A strange accident. A random moment on the internet. A few minutes of footage that changed everything. And looking back now, I wouldn't erase it. Because without that video, I might still be living inside a lie. And no matter how painful the truth may be, it will always be better than a beautiful illusion.